This Rugged Ridge Nautic 9,500 pound winch with steel cable is going to be for those of you that have a 1987 all the way up through the most current model year Wrangler that are looking for a quality winch that's going to be a little bit less expensive than some of the others because it doesn't have a lot of those other add-ons and those other frills, but is going to be a waterproof solenoid box, so you know this is going to hold up for you really well for a good long time. This winch, like most others, is going to be a very simple 1 out of 3 wrench installation, and we'll show you how to do that in just a second. So when you're shopping for a winch, you're going to have a couple of decisions to make. One is going to be the pulling power of the winch, or the pulling capacity of the winch. This again is a 9,500 pound winch. They go all the way up to 12,000 and then even less for smaller vehicles and ATVs. The pulling power of your winch should be roughly 1.5 times the loaded trail weight of your vehicle. So if you have a big, heavy, armored up 4-door JK, maybe you want to go with a 12,000 pound. If you have a lighter rig or maybe a smaller 2-door without as much armor, 9,500 pounds is going to be more than enough for you. The other big decision you have to make is whether you want a steel cable or a synthetic line. Now, a synthetic line in general is going to be a little bit more expensive, and they are going to require a little bit more maintenance and to be replaced a little bit more often than a steel cable. The benefit to a synthetic line is that it doesn't kink, it's a little bit lighter weight when you're pulling it up those muddy hills for recoveries, and it's going to be a little bit safer as it doesn't store energy. So if a synthetic line snaps when it's under load, it falls to the ground. The steel cable, you have to use a winch flag in order to make sure you stay safe while winching. So one isn't necessarily better than the other, but they do have different benefits and different drawbacks. This of course does have that steel cable, so it's something that's going to last a good long time for you. It's fairly maintenance free, and as long as you're using a winch flag and following those common sense rules of winching, this is still going to be a very safe method of self-recovery. In general, a winch is going to be really good to have on your Jeep, whether you're wheeling with a bunch of people or just with one buddy. Again, you should never really wheel alone, but even if you were, you could use something like this to recover yourself or a friend when you're out on the trail. This is going to have some benefits over a tow strap or a snatch strap because it's a very slow and controlled pull. You don't have to have another vehicle having a little bit of a run-up area to gain some speed like you would with a snatch strap. So a winch is going to be a really good recovery tool to have. This one here, again, is going to be a 9,500 pound winch, so it has some good pulling capacity for those lighter rigs, has this steel cable. The Nautic in the name means that it does have a waterproof solenoid pack, so that's not something you find in a lot of winches out there, and that is going to be a benefit. So whether you're dunking the Jeep in water, in mud, or you're just driving on the road and it's getting sprayed when it gets rainy, this is going to ensure that you're not going to have any sort of water damage. I mentioned before that this is a fairly no-frills winch, and what I mean by that is it doesn't have some of the features of much more expensive winches. It doesn't have a wireless remote, it doesn't have a built-in compressor or lighting, it doesn't have any of that stuff. But I do think that this is still a very solid winch, and for the price of right around $320, I think it's still going to be a very solid option for you. So as I mentioned, this is a pretty easy 1 out of 3 wrench install. Let me show you exactly how you get it bolted up. For this installation, you're going to need a 13mm socket, a 16mm, an 18mm socket. Also going to need a couple of smaller sockets for the battery terminals, a 10 and a 12. We have an 18mm open-ended wrench, and then of course a driver for all those sockets. This is a 3/8 socket driver. Finally, you'll need the small Allen key that comes in the package. So there are a couple of different ways to install a winch on your Jeep. They're all going to be pretty easy. If you already have a winch bumper on your Jeep, you can go ahead and do exactly what we're going to do, which is to prep the winch as much as possible on the table and then bolt it directly onto the bumper. If you have a winch bumper and it's a little bit difficult to get to the winch mounting hardware, it may be easier to remove the bumper, bolt the winch onto the bumper, and then install that entire package on the front of the Jeep. That's completely up to you. Like I said, what we're going to do is prep our winch on the table and then install it onto the bumper that's already installed onto the Jeep. So the first step in that process is going to be getting these mounting brackets for the solenoid pack attached to the pack, and then get the pack bolted to the top of the winch. There are a few different ways to mount this solenoid pack onto the winch. The way that we're going to be doing it is with this bracket here, which is a pretty traditional mount, setting the solenoid directly on top of the winch body itself, but there are a few different brackets, as I mentioned, where you can mount the solenoid to either side of the main winch drum or in a variety of different locations. So you choose which is going to work best for your build. Now that you have the brackets installed on the solenoid box, you can put the whole box on top of the winch. The next step is going to be attaching these cables onto the winch body itself. The 3 short cables are going to go on the back side of the winch here, and each one of the terminals is color coded. You'll see the red boot is going to go on the terminal with the red plastic surround. You want to make sure that you put it underneath the flat washer and the cut washer so that nothing can vibrate loose on you. Go ahead and tighten those down. Once you're finished, you can slide the boot back over to make sure you're not going to have any sort of shorts between the different terminals. The last bit of wiring you have to do before actually getting the winch attached onto the Jeep is attaching this long black lead that's going to run all the way up to the battery negative terminal, and that attaches onto the bottom of the winch here. Go ahead and loosen up that nut. There's also a small black cable that comes off of the solenoid that has to go into the same terminal as well. Now that we're finished all the wiring we can do on the table, we're going to install the captured nuts into the bottom of the winch. Now these don't really have a good way of staying in place while you're moving the winch around, so what I like to do is take a little piece of tape and just put it over the opening. You can use any kind of tape you'd like. You're going to end up taking it off when you're finished anyway. Most of your winch-ready bumpers will have a spot to mount your fairlead. Of course, this is a roller fairlead because we have a steel cable on this winch, and it really just gets mounted right up here with the included hardware. Now it's time to get the winch placed in the spot where it's going to go, but before we start bolting it in place, we're going to get the end of the wire fed through the fairlead. Cut the rubber band holding the cable in place, and pull the end of the cable forward. And this can take a little bit of maneuvering, but this is important to do before bolting the winch into place. Pick up the winch body a little bit, slide it to the side. Once you have the cable fed through the fairlead, it's a good idea to go ahead and attach your hook. That way the cable can't pull itself back through while you're maneuvering the winch body. It's just a matter of pulling the cotter pin, sliding the pin through the hook, putting the cotter pin back into place, and then bending it open so the pin can't back out. Now we can maneuver the winch body into place over the mounting holes and go ahead and install the hardware from the bottom side. Make sure you get all of the mounting hardware for your winch nice and tight. The final step in this install is to get these two long leads connected up to the battery. In order to do that, we're going to pop the hood, feed the wires underneath the grille and along the inner fender up to the battery terminal. Once you have the wires run up along the inside of the fender, you can loosen up the nut on your battery terminal to make the connection at the battery. So that's going to do it for this install. All you have to do is get your hood closed and your winches finished up. So if you are looking for a truly waterproof winch for the front of your Jeep, I would recommend the Nautic winch from Rugged Ridge, and you can find it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.